Today we are going to be focused on a really important topic for our humanity. And so that is how we build stronger relationships through empathy. And I am deeply honored to introduce several individuals who will lead us through some empathy conversations today, and for you to get to meet them, to interact with them, and just as much for them to get to meet and interact with you. So it will be a powerful and moving session today. Before we dive in, I want to share something that happened in one of our prep conversations. And Laura, I see you there on the top in my screen. In one of our prep conversations, you made the comment that you can actually feel the anguish with healthcare providers, and you can feel the anguish for patients. And your words, I felt in a way that is deeper than I've experienced in my life. And I really think that being a part of this COVID Advocacy Exchange this year and getting to interact with people all over the world and with all kinds of different conditions and experiences and everything we're all facing, it has made me a more empathetic human and able to feel experiences that are very different than mine. And so, Laura, I just wanted to share with you and everybody how much that real empathy across the different perspectives affected me, and how much I hope today in our conversation we all have that. There was a moment I will never forget in my life. It was several years ago that I went to see my dermatologist. So as a cancer patient with a history of radiation treatment, I always worry about what that's going to do to me. And I had some suspicious looking areas on my back that I wanted to get checked out. And so I scheduled an appointment and went in to see my dermatologist before COVID, of course. So this was an in-person appointment. And when she came in the room, she started asking me questions. And then she started asking me more questions. And then I started talking about grit, and she started asking me even more questions. And I could feel her getting excited and interested. And it was a conversation just like we're having here. And after 4, maybe 5 minutes, I actually stopped. And I said to her, "I'm just shocked that you're taking this much time with me." And without missing a second, she looked at me and she said, "I care about you, not your skin." And that was a moment as a cancer patient I had never had before. I felt seen and heard, and I felt her empathy in a way that changed me. And I think I'm hopeful that, we know our experiences, but coming together and sharing what we do, the ripple effects from that and how broad those impact the world, it makes me really hopeful for humanity. And so as we move through this together, I'll be present with you, but really thinking about how much our time is a part of something bigger than us and of moving the world forward. We have had now in the COVID Advocacy Exchange, more than 5,000 people register and spend their time with us from nearly 100 countries, all kinds of conditions, and so many different lived experiences. And despite all those things that make us unique, the one common thing that binds all of us is our dedication and our passion to improving quality of life and survival in the face of healthcare conditions. And so I just want to start by saying thank you for being a part of that, for everything you do individually, and for everything this means collectively. I would like to see, I can't see Chanel on my screen yet. Ben, may I ask if Chanel is with us? Do you see her or no? Okay, so we're going to start with Erin, and then we'll welcome Chanel as she joins us. Erin, before I have you introduce yourself and start the conversation, you shared a video of Brene Brown setting up for this session. And Brene Brown's comment is, empathy is feeling with people. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to frame it. And so I am honored to welcome you and for us to feel with each other today. Please, everybody, welcome Erin.
Thank you, Dave. You're going to get me crying right from the start, Dave. Geez, way to set me up to start crying. So I want to thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here. And I want to start off by thanking any healthcare provider that's on the call. There have been so many sacrifices they've made this year. And I know just from being in the healthcare community on a different side, on the pharmaceutical side, it's really hard every day. And so thank you so much for the sacrifices you make. So my story really starts a long time ago. So I grew up in a very wonderful family. I was a very blessed child. I really had a magical childhood. And we were a very close-knit family. Mom and dad were married, and I had 2 older siblings. So I'm the baby of the family. I am not spoiled, although my brother and sister would maybe say differently. And as our family grew up, things were going well. And in 1996, my father, who was just the energy of the house, had a great spirit and a lot of fun. He was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Unfortunately, 10 months later, he passed away. He was doing pretty well, and then, just took a turn. And so my family was devastated, as I think any of you can understand that if you've been through something similar. And it was a hard time. We had to get through it, the grieving process, and realize what's life going to be like without him, and figure that out. And we were able to do that. And we did that mostly through sharing funny stories and silly stories of my dad and his craziness and the joy that he brought us. So we got through that period, and about 20 years passed. My sister, Megan, who's also my best friend, was also diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This one was actually, they're not supposed to be connected, these cases, so we've been told. My sister's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was actually the good one. If you want to say that you get a good version of a cancer, it was supposed to be the good one. And unfortunately, the cancer, although curable, caused an autoimmune disease, and the autoimmune disease caused a lung disease. And the lung disease was the problem. The lung disease was very aggressive, also very rare. So one of the few times in life when you don't want to be called rare is when you have a disease, as many of you may know. So this lung disease was very aggressive, and over a 12-month period, her body just took a beating and her health declined very quickly. She was only 47 years old. She ended up passing away 3 days before her 48th birthday. And her spirit was very similar to my dad. She was a fighter, and she never gave up. During that time, I live in Dallas, Texas, and my sister lived in Charleston, South Carolina. So I would fly back and forth. I was not her primary caregiver. My mother was, and who I think might be on the call. So hi, Mom. And she did a wonderful job caregiving for her. And I acted as a patient advocate along with the rest of my family. I have a background in pharmaceutical sales. I'm a trainer for a pharmaceutical team. And so I'm used to speaking to physicians. I've spent a whole career speaking to physicians and nurses. And so I realized that I had an advantage. I had an advantage of knowing what questions to ask and how to communicate with healthcare providers, because it's something that I teach others to do on a daily basis. And that led me to, after my sister passed away and we were devastated, I had to have something good come out of it. And the only way I could figure to do that is to write a book. And I call it Badass Advocate. Not that I thought I was a badass advocate, but really the idea is to hopefully make someone else a badass advocate and help you to learn from my experiences. And I think we can only make each other stronger. And I love what Dave's doing. If we can share our stories and come together, we can only help each other. And that's my goal, is just to help others and also learn myself, so I can continue to share the lessons that we've learned, because many times we're just thrown into this situation with no experience. It's totally unexpected and you don't know what to do. You're a fish out of water. So let's help each other and come together and see what we can do for our loved ones and hopefully get them the best care possible. Dave talked about quality of life. That's my goal, is to help you, if you're a patient advocate, get your loved one the best care they possibly can.
Thank you, Erin. So deeply inspired by your story, and we have a surprise for everyone at the end of the session. So we will send out some information. I'll tell you more about that as we get through the conversation. Thank you, Erin. Mm-hmm. So next, I am deeply honored to introduce Laura Adams, and for you to hear about why she has the passion and the fire that she does now and what she's doing with that. So please, everybody, help me welcome Laura.
Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be with all of you today. I just feel the emotion coming through the screen. It's amazing. I want to share with you sort of my journey to empathy, which I think I may not have been born with an empathetic bone in my body, but the subtitle of my journey, I guess, would be How Life Got My Attention. I have this interesting background of being a provider, but also being a mom, and then being a breast cancer survivor. So I've had a chance to look at life from both sides now, so to speak, from multiple perspectives. Early in my career, very early, I was a young staff nurse working in rural Colorado in a tiny little hospital, 35 beds with in the middle of nowhere. We were all they had. And I loved my job. About 22 years old, I was super excited about taking care of all these patients. It was a small hospital. I worked night shift with a 19-year-old licensed practical nurse. We took care of 35 patients that night. Our doctors, we had 2 of them on staff, and they went home to sleep at night. So it wasn't as if we had backup in the hospital. We didn't. But we loved it. We worked hard, took good care of our patients, we hoped. But I lived in fear always, as every clinician does, that you'd get that phone call or you'd get that message that said, you made a mistake. And I made a catastrophic mistake. I made a catastrophic medicine overdose on a young child pre-op. And that morning that I got ready to leave my shift after a long night, I was headed out off the nurse's station, and I heard the intercom come on from down in the surgery suite. And our surgeon, I could hear the tone of his voice, and it was ominous. I knew that something really bad was happening downstairs. And he said, "Is Laura there? Somebody find Laura." And I raced over to the intercom and I said, "Dr. Lee, I'm still here. What's wrong?" He said, "Laura, I don't know what you gave this child pre-op, but," he said, "she's seizing. She's in a coma. It's got to be the pre-op medication. Please go find out." So I felt like I'd stopped breathing. It was just the most horrific moment of my life. I raced over to the medication area and I looked down, and much to my dismay, I could see immediately that I'd given her a 10 times overdose of the dangerous drug scopolamine. And I knew that the side effects of that overdose were seizures, coma, and death, and that she was experiencing 2 out of 3 and headed to the 3rd. I was terrified. I was like praying as hard as I'd ever prayed in my life to please have this little girl's life spared. She was going to die at my hands, and I couldn't believe it. The team was absolutely stunningly effective in that operating room that morning, and they saved her life. I was just incapacitated. The hospital let me go home for a couple of days, and I spent it in a dark room thinking, just get out. You're not competent to do this job. You've nearly killed a child from care that was intended to help. So you just have to stop. And after a few days went by and I was able to breathe again and feel like the anvil started to move off of my chest, I started thinking, wait a minute, I'm passionate about this. I think I'm at least average intelligence. What happened here? So I went back and did a little investigation and found out that before that order had landed on my desk as the night shift nurse that night, it had been hand transcribed. The doctor wrote the order correctly. It had been hand transcribed 6 times before it got to me, 2 times by someone with no pharmacological background. So they would not know that the movement of a decimal point, especially in a pediatric dose, was going to be death by decimal point. And so I was horrified and thought, is this the design? And then I realized that much of healthcare had grown up lacking design. There was not a sense. And I just knew that it could have been maybe Florence Nightingale giving the dose that day, and she may have had the same propensity for error that I had. So it got me started in thinking about, I will never forget the devastation in that family. And it spurred me to spend the rest of my life and career dedicating myself to working on the design of this system so that never, ever happens to another family member, another patient, and certainly another caregiver. I sort of went on a little earlier because I'm not sure it completely took in me to understand the empathy from the perspective. When I was married, I married a man with a 4-year-old set of twins and a 6-year-old. And those kids, we all grew up as a family together, and we thought we'd have one along the way. We didn't. until the twins got to be 19 years old and the oldest got to be 20. And I found out, yeah, I can conceive. And so we started all over again. I was thrilled, delighted, fabulous to have Ben, thrilled out of my mind. And then I took him in for his first set of vaccinations. And I handed my infant over. And I saw them approaching his leg with that gigantic needle, what looked like a little stick of spaghetti that they were going to put that needle into. And I knew about the fallibilities of the healthcare system. And you can almost imagine that I was terrified by what I felt might be karma. And I just prayed at that moment, please make that the right dose, the right drug, the right everything, because you have my whole life in your hands with this baby. And I just felt a sense of vulnerability that, oh my God, I'd never felt before in my life. And I understood it differently from a patient. And that was a family perspective. And then the third time, and maybe the time it really took, I was now often and on my career trying to incorporate these lessons learned. And I'm building a breast center in Michigan. And I'm just thrilled because I am the consultant that they have chosen to make it patient-centered. Now, someone suggested we include some patients and families. And I said, you have me. We don't need any patients and families. I have taken care of them for years. I'm all you need. So I said, okay, we need lovely lighting. I want it calm and soothing. And by the way, this paint, yes, it's in my bathroom right now. It's so soothing. I swear, let's have this paint. And we need good signage because I know that's important. And guys, I was at a conference, so I'm going to bring the coup de grace. Yes. I walked out in that lobby in that hotel for that conference and I saw that water cooler with lemons in it. So I want a water cooler with, nothing says we care like water with lemons. So we had it in the center and I was thrilled and I couldn't wait to meet with the focus group. And I sat down with the first group of women that went through the breast center because it was open now. And the first woman that speaks up in the group says, "What were you thinking?" I was sort of stunned. And she said, "No, seriously, you called this thing the breast center? Would it have been a men's health center? What were you going to call it? The testicle center?" I just sat there like I'd been tased and all that could go through my mind was like the penis pavilion. Like, no, wait a minute. No, that is totally her point is you can't name it after like a body part. And we did. And she said, every time I have to walk into this, I walk in under a sign in this small town that yells the breast center. There's something wrong with my breast. Why didn't you just name it after somebody that, gave you the most money to build it? And I sat there thinking, I thought I knew. And from that moment on, all of those lessons, the epiphany happened. And I said, don't you ever approach this again without listening deeply to the stories of your patients. You will never know. Even after I had breast cancer, I had my own set of stories, but that didn't mean I could stop listening to the stories of others, because without that set of stories, I'm never going to be capable of practicing at the top of my humanity.
Wow, Laura, every time somebody risks exposing what you did, it gives me courage to feel more empowered to do my own. And I can't imagine feeling more empowered by your vulnerability. I saw Adriana wrote in the chat how much it helps us eliminate shame. And I feel like we all hold a lot of that inside from mistakes, things we've made that we're not proud of, or just being human. And I think what your voice is so empowering it, helping us move past that. So thank you. Wonderful. Well, Laura's going to come back. So we have something more in store for you quickly. I would like to, I believe Chanel is with us. And I can't think of a more perfect moment to transition to Chanel and have her share her gift and her voice with us. Chanel Gabriel is an international poet, singer, and lupus advocate. And Chanel, I am deeply honored to welcome you and to give you the floor. Please share your gift with us.
Thank you. And greetings from Brooklyn, New York, where we had a lovely storm and took out my Wi-Fi. I'm so glad to be able to be here and MacGyver this back so I could have internet. But I'm just going to share my story in one of the best ways that I know how, through poetry, spoken word. So this is literally story. This is literally me telling my story. If it wasn't for vanity in college, I don't know where I'd be. See, I was achy and sleepless with migraines all week. Still, I continued to keep on going. Class from 8 to 2:30, BSU meeting at 3, dance practice at 4. At 5, I have to uphold my student senate presidency. Sorority meets at 9, study from 10 to 3, 7 a.m. My day just rewinds, and that was just Monday. Party, sneaking a few conversations, whatever new guy I was talking to. See, this is the marsala that makes up the stew of the average college student. And I was no different in every organization. See, I was Black and somehow in charge of the Latin American Student Union. I mean, they asked, see, stress was like my best friend, and I thrived in confusion, ignoring the weight that increased on my shoulders by the tons. Mornings got harder. I attributed it to me aiming to go farther than the average sophomore. Joints were swollen and sore, must be from dance practice. See, they say excuses are the tools of the incompetent, and I was foolish to think that I could be so negligent with my body and think that all these symptoms were somehow irrelevant. And it got so bad one day that I walked with a limp. So yeah, something was wrong. And I saw butterflies, not like the Mariah Carey or the Michael Jackson song, but I saw a mark on my face. Didn't matter. The semester was over and I was home and back at my mom's place. Like I said, if it wasn't for vanity, I don't know where I'd be. I still had my symptoms, but I was simply glad to be home, getting ready to go out. And you know, I had a cute outfit on, looking all nice and grown, went to comb my hair. And then I realized that a patch and another patch and another patch weren't there. Vanity had me at the doctor the next day, said, "Doctor, I have some other complaints, but they can wait. Take care of this. Take care of the exterior like most people nowadays." And the doctor had this baffled look on his face, did some blood tests, put a hat on, and I went on my merry way. And a few weeks later, the doctor said, "Chanel, have you ever heard of lupus?" I said no, and he proceeded to say that my immune system was too strong in attacking my own body. And much to my dismay, I had to figure out how I could fit this into my schedule. Can you believe I still went to work that day? All for vanity. I refused to see that overworking myself so as not to pair ill to others could have eventually ended my many responsibilities early. Well, a few months later, my body, it made me rest, because lupus, it's a disease that flares up in times of stress, and I was constantly pushing it as if fighting my humanness. Well, this machine, it broke down. Hospitalization and the possibility of death forced me to do less, but see, it put things in perspective, because life is about more than just meetings and deadlines. I'm not a millionaire. I only have one lifeline. And if it flatlines, I don't want to have any regrets. So I vow to live every day as if I have 24 hours left. I'm an artist, an alchemist, purifying myself every chance that I get. I've learned to accept experience as the past and the present as a gift. So for all the people that didn't see the sunrise this morning, you better enjoy it. Value your health and love life. No matter how many miles you go, don't confuse neutral with drive. And no, sometimes you have to bare your teeth in order to finally be able to smile, so my vanity will sustain me. God helped me to believe in me. Can't you see? Lupus can't hold me. I'm going to keep climbing walls like an ivy. I'm going to keep climbing walls like an ivy. Trying to stop me is in vain. Like an IV, tenacity, it flows through my bloodstream, and I'm reaching my goals, no matter how hard it seems. Put God first, then myself, and then my family, because can't nobody love me if I don't love me. And being gas, being conceited, it's not cool, but nothing's wrong with a little bit of vanity, because me loving myself, well, that's the beginning of my testimony. Thank you for allowing me to share that with you all. Thank you. I know people are like,
everybody, please take
yeah.
Take
what?
That
was amazing.
Thank you for allowing me to share that. And I just want to speak to it really quickly, although I feel like that tells so much of the story. But I think that as we're starting this conversation around empathy, there's a space that we have to have for ourselves. And I don't think we also think about that even as we are trying to actively save others and try to support others and be able to be caretakers and be able to be all of the wonderful roles that we all play, that of all the people that are on this call. And I think that that's something that is really important, is the grace that we need to give ourselves to be able to, and knowing when to push, when to say, okay, maybe I can't really do that right now today. Maybe I need to take some time out, or maybe this is not actually the moment that I need to continue on. I might need to catch my breath. And I think that that's something that there's a part of empathy that I do think is important for us to have for ourselves as well. As they say, you can't put oxygen masks on others. You have to put one on yourself first when you get on the plane. I think that that's a really, really important factor as patient advocates, as in all the roles that we all play. So I just wanted to at least say that.
I have never been in a Zoom meeting where everybody took their mic off mute and clapped. So anybody that wants to do that, please clap for Chanel or put clap in the chat. But
thank you.
Chanel, may I ask, what is it like to find those words to share your experience? What does it feel like?
It was hard. I will say this. I mean, it's definitely gotten easier over the years, but it was very, very challenging. That poem in particular, I wrote that in the hospital. At least I started it in the hospital. And the first time that I was hospitalized in my entire life, other than being born, was for lupus. And I think when I first wrote it, I didn't think anybody really needed to hear it. A lot of times we do self-isolate, and I think that sometimes that's how we process, and maybe we do need that space at times, especially in the beginning, very early on. But I happened to share it at an open mic. Well, no, it was a feature, and usually I always have my set that I prepare, and some said just hey, I'm working on this. Let me share it with you all, and from there, that's really what catapulted me into like these spaces of sharing my story around living with a chronic illness and supporting others. Because after I finished, I was just like, nobody else is going to know what I'm going through. I'm just sharing this. And so many people came to me after this show. And this is, this is at the New York Poets Cafe here in New York City. And people came up to me like, my mom has lupus. I just got diagnosed a week ago. Like, it was just so insane to me that something that I said could, inspire others to want to talk about what they're going through. And they're like, I've never told anybody. Like, and I think that we don't always see our voices as the advocate. We don't always see our stories or our honesty, our transparency, our vulnerability as part of the support and the help that we can provide others, as well as ourselves, because it definitely gave me space to be able to also process like what I was feeling. And I think that that's something, it was hard. And sometimes there are days there are days where talking about myself is hard, where I'm like, I don't want to talk about myself, like, because it is a up and down trajectory, especially with lupus, which is a series of flares and remissions. There's some days I'm like, I don't feel the way I felt at the end right now, that poem. But it's important to also say that too.
You use the word space, Chanel, and that's such a perfect word for this moment. And so your sharing your gift was amazing. And we're going to now together, and I encourage everybody to join the conversation if you're comfortable. We're going to start with Erin. And so if we can have Erin go first, but we're going to do three separate little experiences in each area. And so anybody that's comfortable, please feel free to join, and then we'll open for a big group conversation. But this is meant to be a space to share your experience, learn from others, and really dig into empathy. So Erin, please take us away.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Wow, Laura and Chanel, I'm really glad that I went first and not last. I didn't have to follow up you two ladies, so thank you for that, Dave. That was amazing. So my question that I have for the group, and I do encourage everyone to share and feel like you're in a safe space, which I think Dave creates, is really for either patients or patient advocates, because patients, as Chanel was saying, have to advocate for themselves a lot as well. And it's really about not the successes that you had, but we all have times when things don't work out how we planned, or we look back and say, oh, shoot, maybe I should have done this. And just to share a little background, when my sister got diagnosed, because we had lost my father already, and I really wasn't an advocate for him, that was a lesson for me. And I thought, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to not play a part. I'm going to make an impact. And so luckily I got a second chance. I wish I almost didn't have to go through it again. Of course I do wish, but at least I was able to advocate for her. But there were certainly mistakes I made along the way, or things that I would go back and do differently. And I'm sure we all feel that way. So that leads to my question, which is, can you share a time when you were advocating either for yourself or someone else and things didn't turn out? Maybe you didn't ask the question that you thought of later, or maybe a physician or a nurse used a medical term that you weren't familiar with, and you just kept going and you didn't clarify and say, I'm not familiar. I don't know what you're talking about, because maybe sometimes we feel like, gosh, that sounds dumb. Maybe I should know that. So I just want to kind of have someone share, or maybe a few people share, what experiences you've had with advocating when it didn't work out the way that you hoped. I'm asking for some vulnerability. I know it.
Probably the biggest one for me is before I actually got my diagnosis. I just expected the doctors to run the right tests and to figure out what was wrong with me. Mm-hmm. So when they told me I had a UTI or a bladder infection and gave me meds and sent me out the door, I didn't fight harder for more testing.
Yeah.
For them to find the tumor that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how, when you did find out they had a tumor, how did that make you feel looking back?
I was pissed that I didn't fight for it sooner.
Yeah.
And I was pissed that they didn't listen to the symptoms that I told them I was having, mm-hmm. and run the proper tests for what I was experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we can all relate to that, right? You look back and you can always wish that you did this, but you didn't know. You didn't know. You could, how many times have we gone to the doctor and think it's something and it's nothing? That's kind of your history of, it's nothing, I'm fine. And the one time it is something. So, yeah. Anyone else would like to share? Thanks, Liz, for being so brave.
I'll share one.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, hi. This is Kathy from BMS, and I just wanted to say thank you all for coming and joining. And it's interesting, Liz, what you were just talking about, and then Erin and Chanel, what you guys have talked about earlier today. We went through an experience last year with my brother, who ended up having to have a liver transplant, but he almost did not get there because we had him in the wrong place with the wrong doctors. Like, nobody knew. But the whole advocating for yourself or for your loved one, it is becoming more and more clear that this is what's going to have to happen. I mean, you can't just expect with, the healthcare system to just take care of you. I think that's how we all grew up and what we all think is supposed to happen. I just don't think that that's the case anymore. And now, even with COVID, how overwhelmed all these hospitals and systems are becoming across the world. I just, being your own advocate is just so important. So all of your stories, and that includes you, Liz, today, it's just really so helpful. And for me, as an advocate for advocates in a big company, this is one of the areas that I think we're going to have to really support going forward, and help people understand, and support our advocacy organizations and the patients in being their own advocates. So just thank you so much, and thanks for that time. Sorry for whoever I interrupted.
I think it was Dave. Thank you, Kathy.
No problem, Kathy. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, but I have one that I circle back to sometimes, and this kind of prompted it with my. It's about my mother. And in 2015, before she passed away, she was at home and getting hospice care, And I feel like I wanted to be her advocate because, I had been working in healthcare and really believe that people should be their own advocates. And my mother was from that generation where she just kind of accepted everything without asking questions. And the hospital experience was just so terrible. And the disconnect between her physician and getting the wrong medicines and late shipments. And I feel like I kind of regret that I didn't do more to make those last days more comfortable for her. Because my father-in-law is a pharmacist, and I was like, gosh, I could have helped so much with, anyway, there's this, we hear so many great stories of how we advocate and do good things, but sometimes I think I look back and I wish I would have done more.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that. And I think it's important that we forgive ourselves too, because you are thrown into a situation that you're not prepared for. No, unless if you're a professional patient advocate. Brian, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah. In terms of regrets, I think one of the general regrets I have is sometimes focusing too much on the personality and not really challenging the institution.
Yeah.
I think it's very, very important that way. I'm 62 years old. I was diagnosed with HIV in 1984. And in those days, you were kind of told to go away and die, effectively. Yeah. Before we had good drugs. I was also temporarily working in Australia, and I was expelled from Australia because you weren't allowed to be HIV positive there. Now, when we came back, the whole system of patient advocacy was, in effect, being run by HIV advocates in those days. We were at the forefront, and we did an awful lot to change things, and actually working with the nurses and working with the empathy of the nurses helped to challenge the stigma, which was a huge issue in terms of HIV. I was very lucky. I became ill, but I managed to survive until the drugs came along to save us. My biggest problem when I think about the advocacy and the mistakes is that sometimes we go in and we make, we work alongside good people, good doctors, good nurses, and actually help to challenge the way that our care is delivered and improve it. And improve it not just for ourselves, but quite often for the clinics as well. But the problem sometimes, and I don't know if it's the same with the American healthcare system, is that sometimes you find that you're relying upon an individual or a few individuals. And when those individuals move on, you then have to go right back to the beginning and start again with the doctors and the nurses all over again. It's almost like you have to tell your story for a second time. Yeah. And quite often it's a story that people haven't heard. Because if you have a younger generation coming through, they would not understand it, how dire it was in the early days of HIV and AIDS. And I kind of noticed it this year with COVID-19, because all of a sudden everything changed. Now, the practice has always been that when systems are changed, or the way that your healthcare is delivered is changed, there's consultation with the people living with HIV, with the patients. And what was clear this year is that systems just changed overnight, like that, with virtually no consultation. And I think the key thing then for an advocate is how to get back in and make sure that when the system's up and running again, it's actually working a bit better. So I think for me, the issue is always having to go through the same thing, because you don't necessarily challenge the institution. I was challenging the institution yesterday, well, not yesterday, sorry, on Monday with my father, because I have a father who's 94 years old, and his general practice surgery had said, we think we'll try and get you your COVID-19 vaccination sometime by the end of this month. And I just phoned him up and I said, no, he's 94. He wants a COVID-19 vaccine as soon as possible. He's at the top of the list. And I took him there to go for it. But there again, that's the advocacy on behalf of someone else that makes that happen. But also, I think it's a case of us making sure that we work with institutions, not just individuals, to ensure that our our care and our empathy, it all depends upon us working together. But if we don't change the way that the system is delivering it, then we create a flaw for ourselves, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Such great points. I think the repeating yourself constantly is exhausting, you know, especially I would imagine as a patient when you're already not feeling well and you have to repeat. It's also scary because things can get missed. And then as the caregiver or the advocate, you know, that's why there's caregiver fatigue, and people get just worn down because it's constant. It's just a constant work in progress. So thank you, Brian, for sharing that. I'm glad to hear that you've made it so long and that you made it through the tough times in the 80s and 90s. Good for you. And having a father in his 90s, that is awesome. We can celebrate that. I think Noreen had her hand up. Is that right, Noreen? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm joining from BMS and I'm happy to be here. Thank you. That I think we have to, I don't know, maybe train healthcare workers better in having empathy and understanding, but there's like biases that are ingrained. I spent 10 years going from doctor to doctor complaining about mild symptoms that, they did some tests and everything was in normal ranges. After 10 years, I was actually living abroad and I saw a female doctor. It was the first time I'd seen a female doctor. And I told her the whole litany again, and she did one extra test that found I had an autoimmune disease. And subsequently, it was Hashimoto's thyroiditis and subsequently thyroid cancer that had been developing. But I was kind of poo-pooed for 10 years. And I feel like, there's a bias against women and others that, oh, you're just complaining. You don't know what you're talking about. You're complaining. And I don't know how that can be addressed, but I really feel it's a problem for women, people of color, et cetera. And I just wanted to mention that.
You know, it's funny, Noreen, that you say that because you just jogged a memory for me. That when my sister, I told you she had that rare lung disease, and we had been seeking second and third opinions and trying to get other people to help us because it is so rare. And I reached out to a physician in Colorado who didn't know my sister. And she wasn't diagnosed for her lung disease for like probably 6-9 months, but she had it. And like I said, it was aggressive. So that's not good news. And the physician said, he's a pulmonologist. And he said, what I always tell other pulmonologists, don't ignore women because they rarely complain. And so if they're not, especially moms, he said, so if they've given birth and they're complaining that something isn't right, listen up. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective from a male physician.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, I don't know if we're on to the next question or if we have more time. I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
Jess, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to jump in.
Go for it.
Sorry. Okay. So, hey, I'm Jess. I am on the GRIT team. My brother, who is next to me, is dealing with the volume. But I just want to touch on that too, because I am a colon cancer survivor, and it took 7 doctors over 5 months to diagnose me. And it was, they said I had hemorrhoids, it was stress, it was everything. I was 25, and I kept telling him like, no, I think it's colon cancer. And by the time I was diagnosed, my prognosis was 12% chance of living beyond 2 months. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm 25. Like, I've been telling you what it is, and no one would do the stupid test. And that's one thing, like, that's what made me come to GRIT and have this whole thing that we're doing now with the advocates, just because it's shocking to me how hard it can be to get a diagnosis and how hard it can be for doctors to put aside what they think is wrong with you and actually listen and come up with a plan where you're part of your own diagnosis and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to have that voice and not be afraid to speak up. I think especially in the US, I don't know, maybe Brian can speak about how it is in his country, but I know in the US, we have such a high regard for physicians, as we should. But then we're afraid to give pushback or really pursue some things and have that voice, and it's understandable. And that's one of my goals, is to help people have that voice, because, and I know Dave and your team, that's what you guys are talking about too. It's so important that we're not afraid to speak up for ourselves or for others. If you feel like something's not right, you have to go for it. Keep pushing. You only get one life, so let's do our best. Thank you for sharing your stories. You're so awesome at being open, and I'm just so touched that you're willing to come off mute and share what you've gone through. And I know it's really hard to talk about regrets, and so I hope you give yourself some grace and forgiveness. I know I'm working on that too.
Thank you,
I'm
Erin.
going to go on mute before I start crying.
Before we make the transition, I see Dan wants to jump in too. Dan, please jump in.
Thanks, Dave. Erin, thank you so much for kicking that conversation off. Similar to you and Laura, I'm with the GRIT team now, but I have a background as a physician. I got my MD from the University of Rochester, then went down to Harvard to do my residency in neurology. Had some experiences similar to Laura, where I saw situations happen in the hospital that I was not expecting to see. Errors happened, and I became kind of disillusioned with seeing what I thought was the best hospital system in the world in a place where there are hospitals on every block, and realizing the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness of some of the care that was offered. And I decided that I wanted to learn about the healthcare system. So I went into consulting. I worked with pharma companies. I worked with insurance companies. I worked with hospital systems to try to figure out some of these issues. And the more that I saw, the more I realized the scope was so large and so all-encompassing that it's gotten to the point where you can't really participate in the healthcare system without having an advocate, without knowing so much yourself. And I mean, even just within the GRIT team, I've kind of taken on the role since I joined in February of offering some of those supports, know the questions to ask, but not everyone has that. And so your book, Erin, I think it's incredibly important, and just understanding where the healthcare system has gotten, the complexities, the subspecialization of physicians, the amount of time that physicians have to spend on an individual patient has gotten insanely low. I was expected to do a neuro exam that takes 45 minutes to an hour in 15 minutes and explain that to patients. That's insane. I think a lot of what people are expressing is that these things are missed because as physicians, we don't have the time to do it. As patients, you're not given the voice and the chance to talk about it and to be able to, because there's no time, and the system is catering to people in a way that is not personal. It's from a monetary standpoint. Our healthcare system is billions and billions of dollars. And so the more that this moves in this direction, the more impersonal it becomes, and the less care is directed to the individual. And so, there are so many ways to do this, and I think everyone brings up important points. And Laura, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with you and detail your experiences and how they've been similar to mine. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that everyone is making such good points, and these viewpoints are coming and really connecting at the bottom line. But we're all coming at this from very interesting and slightly different directions, and agreeing on the same basic principles. And that's what needs to start happening in many different areas in order to solve some of these issues.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing that. One thing that I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think it's good to have the perspective of a physician. And I've always said, the doctors have many patients. If you're a patient advocate, you have hopefully one, right? Like we had my sister, and she was our main focus. So that's why it's a team effort. We have to work together and understand that. I think majority of physicians have a good heart, and they got into medicine because they're passionate about helping people and wanting to heal people. And we have to understand they've got lots of responsibilities. The system is maybe broken, not the people. Thank you for sharing. I want to pass it over. Now I lost his name. Jeff, I think it was. Jeff. There's such great chat going on, and I lost his name for a second. Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Erin. And thanks to everybody for sharing. This is really an impressive group, and I applaud your courage for sharing your personal stories. Really inspiring. Gotten goosebumps several times over the last half hour listening to your stories. I've dealt with health issues probably my whole life, but really was kind of not really sure how to advocate for myself. I've been in the industry of making new medical devices for the last 12 years. And, my mom was in healthcare. She was an MRI tech. She had lupus and celiacs. And so I was always familiar with these things. But as I grew up, I always had stomach issues and problems, but I didn't really know how to express or advocate for myself. And eventually, due to stress and everything else, I ended up going to work one day and doubled over in pain. Just wasn't sure what it was. It felt like stress. It felt like bloating and gas and all those things. And I'd end up perforating my bowel. And due to chronic diverticulitis, been in and out of the hospital for the last 5 years. Eventually had a sigmoidectomy where they took out 12 inches of my colon. But even after that, you almost have to have a master's degree to understand how to navigate the system. And it's so frustrating to have to deal with that and not know what to eat or what to do, and there's no real concerted effort. You've got all these different physicians that are all kind of poking and prodding at you and doing all these different tests, but there's really no way to provide a comprehensive plan for individuals going through these situations. And then going into the hospital, and even the hospital doesn't really even know how to feed patients when they go through these procedures. So, waking up out of surgery and they want to feed you Jello and broth or salt and sugar. And I just wasn't improving. So, I know what these patients are saying in terms of the frustration of navigating that system, and it needs to be better. There's so much opportunity to improve. So I applaud you all for kind of taking the reins and being these champions for advocacy, because I think that's what we need, right? I've struggled with friends that have gone through similar problems, but maybe they didn't have the same level of healthcare coverage. And while I could get them access to my doctors, they might not have been in network, and they might, so everybody is kind of dealing with this from, different, disadvantages. And I just wanted to share that frustration that, I think we're all kind of going through. But even as somebody that's in the industry, it can be really difficult to navigate. And so, I applaud you for setting up a platform where we can talk about this and make these improvements, because there's a lot that we can do together. I want to applaud Chanel. That was beautiful words that you would put together to describe that scenario. I see myself in a lot of what you said, in that drive to always just, push that stress down, just keep, showing a positive face. But I think it's really important for self-care and self-advocacy that we're able to reflect, take a step back, and and just take a breather. I think we're so driven, and society pushes us to succeed so often that we forget to take care of ourselves, because success at the cost of your health and your family is not success. And I think we need to teach that in schools, right? Really. So I just wanted to share that, but thank you to everybody for saying that. And hey, David, good to see you again. There are lots of friends on here that I can see, but we're all going through this together. Everybody's got something they're dealing with, and I think it also helps to advocate for kindness, because everybody we run into is dealing with something. You might not see it on the surface, but it's there. So thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing that story. I love all these stories that you guys are sharing, and I think it's important to keep sharing them if you're willing to, with friends and family and wherever you can, because the more that others can learn from your experiences, I think they can do better, when they go through it, and you can only help people.
Thank you, Erin, so much for your grace and leading, asking that, and for everybody, your courage and sharing and really hearing everything. Before we have Laura do a similar conversation, I just wanted to ask, part of what we want to do in 2021 is invite other individuals who need to be a part of this conversation. So many of you had said more healthcare providers. If there's anybody that you want to have a part of this conversation to hear the change that is needed, please type it in the chat, whether that's providers, payers, policymakers, anybody that you want to be a part of this conversation, please add it in the chat, and we'll make sure that we broaden our conversation as we go into next year. So thank you very much. Laura, I'm honored to have you come back on. And same thing, anybody that's comfortable, please continue, and Laura, take it away.
Great. I do want to capitalize on and touch a little bit on the threads that just came through with, I think we realize with our clinician suicide rates at an all-time high, that there is a feeling among caregivers that they're trapped in this system as well. Brian, when you talked about feeling like you would have to depend on a heroic individual, but then when that individual would leave, the system didn't support it. And there's so many things that are structurally built into this. For example, when we think about the payment model, we are the only industry that gets paid regardless of quality. We don't have to keep you well. We can actually, when we make an error, we're the only industry that can inflict a defect on our customer and bill you to fix it. In that, if there was a time when we didn't wash our hands and you got an infection, we could just bill to treat your infection. And I don't think that anybody was ever greedy, avaricious, evil. I know I wasn't. But I would walk into my hospital when I was a hospital administrator in New Orleans, and the first thing I wanted to know was heads in beds and how many sick people. Do we have a full surgery schedule? Awesome. And guess what, people? It is going to be a bad flu season. Isn't that great? We're going to make budget. And when I think about how that took someone like me, I studied with a theorist by the name of W. Edwards Deming, who said that bad systems bring out the worst in good people. I think that payment model that we have that pays our worst cardiologist as much as our best cardiologist or our worst oncologist. Actually, they get paid more because they have more errors, more problems, more returns to the OR and things like that. So I just would say that I think we have a systemic issue here. The good news is I think there's some change on that horizon. People are sick of that system because it's toxic in the way that it does not give patients time to be heard, doesn't give clinicians time to hear them. And the two of you together have had it with that system. So I would love to just keep this flow moving in the sense of going back to a point for your experiences where if you could share with me a moment where you actually, in the course of all of this, felt seen, heard, understood. You felt the power of empathy. Where did you have that experience where you felt like someone heard me, or I now have this rush of a sense of human connection and I'm visible now? Or was there a time when you suddenly felt that about a caregiver, or a time when you understood their humanity, you felt a sense of empathy for them? Where were those moments of empathy in your experience?
I can make one comment when there was a kind of eureka moment for me at a conference in a big World AIDS conference in Durban. And there'd been a massive discussion anyway about how we could get these new drugs that treated HIV into resource-poor countries, because it was being rolled out very, very well in Western Europe and in the US and Canada, Australia and New Zealand. And we'd taken people aside, and we suddenly realized that, in actual fact, some of the actual reluctance came from doctors who actually thought too much would be expected of them. But at this conference, we sat down with all the doctors, the patient advocates sat down with the doctors and the nurses who were there. And actually, by the end of that conference, at that point, the only people we had to take on after that were the politicians and the people who were providing the money. And also at that time, you had your kind of Bill Gates coming along and starting to fund these things. But in actual fact, if you know that you have the doctors and the nurses on board trying to deliver a complicated medicine in a country where medicine shouldn't be complicated, if you've got the doctors and the nurses on board, to be perfectly honest, taking on the politicians isn't too much of a problem. It might seem slightly strange saying that, given that we all come from rather complex countries with our politicians. But I think that to me was the big lesson. It was sitting down thinking, what's our target here? What is it that we want? We want to get these drugs, not just in Scotland, not just in the US. And we sat down with our US colleagues working on this. And we actually did make a point of targeting the nurses, the doctors, the pharmacists. And once we got them on board, it all worked. So I think that for me was an absolute lesson. Not only that, their language changed, because prior to that, if they were giving a talk and giving you some wonderful results on the studies that they'd carried out, you would notice that they always referred to there were 1,213 subjects on this trial. Yeah. Later on, they used the word people. They didn't use the word subjects. Their language was changing. Not only that, within a year or two of that conference, every single presenter who was talking about the scientific trials that they'd been working on actually finished by saying, I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in this trial, the doctors and the nurses, and list a few people. And then at the end say, I'd also like to thank all the people who took part in this trial for putting their energy into coming along. Previously, we never got thanked, but we did eventually.
I'm thinking from your story, the notion that when people sit knee to knee and have conversations and talk about common goals, I think it would be astonishing to find out how closely aligned you are with providers who want to take on this circumstance that has them not practicing the way that they want to practice and you not receiving the care that you want to get. I think there's an enormous power in coming together. That may be more of our future, is having more of those conversations, because they are in desperate need of change as well, because this is not fulfilling to them. It's never what they went into this to do. Anybody else have a moment when you felt heard or seen? It was almost an epiphany moment when you felt like after so long, there was someone that heard your story, or where you felt like you held a particular view. Maybe it was a caregiver, maybe another circumstance where you suddenly felt like you understood somebody, you listened, and a story awakened you.
This is Sandy from BMS. And I have a story. When my older son was 19 months old, he was in the hospital, and they thought initially a neurological issue. And then they told us he had lymphoma, and I was pregnant then with our second one. And he was in the hospital for a week, and it was just the worst time in our lives. And my husband stayed overnight with my older son. I needed to go home, but I stayed as long as I could, and sometimes went past the time I was supposed to stay. This was Weill Cornell, and back then New York Hospital. And I knew I was creeping up and staying longer than I should have, but I just couldn't leave my husband and son in this terrible situation where we were told at one point he might live to be 5 years old. And so I remember I stayed, and I knew that the nurse who was in charge of the floor that night was looking at me, finding out what time I was leaving, but I was so distraught I couldn't confront her, say anything. So she finally called me into her office, and I said, oh, here it comes. I'm going to get yelled at. And she said to me, she says, you know, we have rules about how long people can stay. And I said, and I just broke down and I said, I know, I apologize, but I'm just so stressed out. I feel horrible. We're going to lose our son. I'm pregnant with a second one. I'm wondering if this child has the same type of issue. And she said, yeah, we have rules, but rules are made to be broken. You stay as long as you want, and it'll be okay. And we're here for you. And I just broke down at that moment because, you know, she heard me. She understood what I was going through as a young mother. And we had a great conversation. And I felt for the first time in this huge hospital system, someone really heard me and understood what I was going through. And I was forever indebted and grateful to her for that.
Wow, my God. What a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine how hard it is to tell that story, because I know from my own that the telling, you can't help but go back there for a moment as you're telling the story. It's always hard.
And it turns out my older son was fine. He had another issue, and he's 31 years old now, and he's fine and healthy as anything. My second son is fine. Our second son is fine too. But thank you for letting me share my story.
Fabulous.
So Laura, I'll share something actually. For especially the patients on this call, one thing that I really learned from my sister's illness, and that the person who my whole family felt compassion from, was the palliative care physician. So when my father was sick, I don't think palliative care was even a thing. And, the palliative care team came in, they introduced themselves to my sister, my mom, and I. And the physician right away was just warm and welcoming. And it wasn't one thing that she did. she just was constantly there for my family. She gave me her cell phone number and told me I could call her at any time. And we know that, you know, my sister was really positive and fighting every day. At the same time, she definitely looked depressed, which was completely out of character for her. She was very even-keeled, happy person her whole life. So we had the physician speak to her privately, and I feel like that was such a gift. So it's almost, she gave us empathy, but she also gave the gift of empathy to my sister, who was the patient, and let my sister unload things. We'll never know what she talked about, but I know she was able to talk about things that she didn't feel comfortable talking to our family about because it was too hard. You know, I think she knew how sick she was, and speaking to a physician was easier to go through those difficult conversations than it would be to my mom and I, who she knew would have broken down crying. So if you're a patient and you haven't tapped into the palliative care team, I highly recommend them. They're pretty amazing individuals.
Yeah, they're some of the most amazing people I ever met in the delivery system, where, you know, they went into it with a deep conviction. And the other magic that I think that they bring along, and they're beginning to train other clinicians about this, is that art of presence, that absolute utter focus. Even if you have that very short period, you're on the treadmill where you've got to be seeing patients. I have known caregivers who have just been astonishingly effective at connecting with people. You know, sometimes I'm known for my experience in digital health because I did lots and lots of work in digital health. And sometimes people have asked me, now that I'm wanting to turn my attention much more toward the building of empathy and human connection and bi-directional bridges, they're saying, you know, what are you doing that? And I'm doing penance, because when providers get in the office, they're busy maintaining their computers and all that sort of thing. And it's been just a breakdown in that ability. Even if there was a time where you could be connected with the patient, you can't now under the payment model with the computer. So I think that those people that I was so amazed would have this gift of being able to be completely and utterly present. They weren't thinking about how many patients they had that day. They were intensely focused on just this moment. And they were so aware that their life only took place in the present moment, that they did not have the future, they did not have the past, because those things were only experienced as the present moment. And I think it's that some people will describe it as, I felt like I was the only person in the world at that moment. And there's something about that. It's not difficult in the sense of you don't have to train up or have a skill for it, but there is something about, if you can do it, it's magical.
And you think that's a really important piece to empathy too, right, Laura? Like being focused on the person that's telling their story and sharing their fears or concerns.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that sometimes people know when they're sharing their stories, you can't help them, that they are terminal, or they are saying something. Your sister knew things and she knows it. And so it's not that they're looking, and they're certainly not looking in the Brene Brown video where she's talking about, they're not looking for someone to paint them a silver lining and say, at least, well, at least you don't have, at least there's this. That's not what they're looking for in the moment. They're looking for a deep human connection that just says, I'm here. And I think that's, I wish more caregivers knew the power of conveying, I'm here.
Yeah, I hear you. Mm-hmm.
Laura, may I ask, you acknowledged the pain in revisiting those moments. May I ask you what it's like knowing what you've gone through to be at this place now and be part of the change to make things more human and more present? What is it like for you to live that purpose?
I feel like I've been called, and it's something, it was really hard for me to tell my story in the beginning, because it was, when you made an error like that, it was seen as an error of the clinician. There was no sense or understanding of a design of system issue or something getting hand transcribed 6 times. It was about, you are incompetent as an individual. So, and no one talked about it, because you could lose your job for having made an error. We drove errors underground because of that. So no one spoke about them. You certainly didn't want to report them. And I feel, I don't use this word very often because I think people might take it wrong, but it was a gift. I almost feel like my breast cancer was a gift. I lost a body part, but I didn't lose my life. But I did gain enormous perspective and an empathy that I just don't know if I could have gotten any other way. So I wish I didn't have to sleep, because I just like to work on this now 24/7. There's so much reparation to do. There's so much building. There's so much restoration to do. And we're at this moment in time where COVID has laid bare our need for human connection. There's never been a more opportune moment to bring this forward. So when I hear this powerful group of people coming together and I hear you sharing your stories, I hope this continues and continues, because to me, I can hear the construction going on. I can hear the beginning of the transformation of this system, because your voices are getting louder and louder and louder. And I know they're having an effect on how this system is being designed going forward. So I feel called, I feel accountable to do it. And it's such an honor.
Yeah. I can feel your passion. I can feel everybody's passion in this, and to be among people that care this much about change is a deep honor, Laura. Thank you so much. Chanel, may we have you come back, and you found your voice through art and through music. Can you lead us, help us understand how you do that with others and what it's like for you now?
So a lot of times the idea of art is seen as something recreational, but I definitely realize that there is a wave moving into this idea of art as therapy, especially over maybe the last 10 years. It's not as new, but it's definitely newer when you think in terms of ways of helping and healing. And some of it is about, me writing things down to myself, me writing these, and for me, it's poems. For somebody else, it might be a journal. I think that those are other great tools, and also journaling like what I'm feeling. And I think that those are the things, like being as thoughtful, or just sometimes just, brain dumping everything that I'm thinking or feeling somewhere. When I finally move into another space, or when I do go to the doctor, I actually have my journal, which was, might have been that I had a really stressful day at work and so did this, but I'm also have a note that says, oh yeah, on Thursday, I actually wasn't feeling well, and this is the time, and this is what I ate right before there, this is what I was going through. So I think there's this part of finding my voice is also just like exploring my voice, using it in different ways, whether it's written, whether it's, I do advocate for us, as long as you don't answer yourself, you can talk to yourself. I do that a lot. I practice in the mirror, my conversations. And that's something that I think is really, really important with this, in finding your voice. And I guess I can pose the question to the group, to everyone. What can you think of a time that you felt, or you truly, really, felt like you used your voice, and you were, and how did you get to that space where you felt comfortable doing that? I mean, we're here, and I feel like so many people are vulnerable in this space, but how did you get to the space to be able to be where you are now and being able to talk this way? I see Brian already has his mic off.
I didn't want to answer that question, but I wanted to say thank you, Chanel, for your comment there, because I think that the kind of work that you do is very, very important. I used to work for one of the largest HIV and AIDS community services organization in Edinburgh. That was the largest. And we had an art therapist who was full-time working with this organization. And the difference that made to people's lives, people who hitherto did not necessarily feel connected to art, but in actual fact, they felt disconnected from everything else anyway. They felt disconnected from the way that their care was being delivered sometimes, disconnected from the fact that they had this illness, sometimes through a blood transfusion, and they didn't know how it had happened. And the art therapy was very, very good. And for a while, we had struggled to keep the funding for it. Very fortunately for us, the Elton John AIDS Foundation came through and paid for 5 years worth of funding to keep it going. But it was a really important job. And some people think that kind of soft stuff isn't so important. But I think it's the soft stuff that gives us the strength. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, Brian, and thank you for shedding light on, another form of just how important art can be and how much space it deserves. And definitely, it's such a powerful way to be able to tell your story, or and very much to tell your story to yourself. And I think that sometimes that can support us being able to tell it to others. So again, I pose the question to the rest of the group. Can you think of a moment where you felt, or what was it that kind of led you to feeling empowered to speak, to share your voice, to share your story? It sometimes takes a few of us like a little longer. It took me about 2 years before I ever thought about talking about having lupus. But what are some ways that you are sharing that story, that voice?
I can share if nobody else has a comment. So my name's Nicole. I'm on the Grit Health team. I'm a breast cancer survivor. I'm coming up on 4 years of survivorship. And I agree with you, Chanel. It took me about 2 years to kind of unpack that. I dealt with the physical first and kind of getting through treatment, and I rushed myself to get back to normal. And then probably about after 2 years, I started dealing with the emotional side of it and really asking myself, why did I have to go through this? What good can come out of it? And I actually hired a life coach to try and help me figure out what I wanted to do with this experience and what I wanted to do with my life. And, I was very open to different possibilities, and it led me down the path of being connected to Grit Health. And I was just so open and just said, hey, if there's any opportunities, I'd love to get involved and help you guys. And here I am today, getting to use my voice every single day and help others do the same.
Thank you. That is so powerful.
That's awesome. Awesome, Nicole. I would share real quick. I'll say that I'm a lung cancer survivor, and for many years I was very quiet about it because as I look back on it, I think I had some sense of survivor's guilt because I had such a great outcome, and so many others that I knew did not have good outcomes. And it was a kind of an epiphany moment. I had a friend of mine who said, you should get more active on Twitter. You should write a blog. And so once I started sort of letting my voice be heard, I started connecting with people. And it was this sort of a magical experience for me to find all these other people who, I always said, well, who cares what I think? But it was like, it really wasn't about me. It was about the community, and so people started to follow me, and I started to follow them. And then I would meet them offline, and it was just really cool. So I think this notion of art, because now I'm not an artist. I don't never consider myself an artist, but now I just launched a podcast, and it's kind of a continuation of that voice, So I just think it's really powerful, and I love your story, Chanel. So it's just really an honor to to be present with all of you people today. Thank you.
I agree, Dave. I think that you said it so eloquently. I think doing these things like you and Nicole and so many on this call help your heart to heal and get through it, whether it's that you've gone through a traumatic event or in our case, we've lost somebody. That's how I felt about writing my book. It was very healing, and just focusing on helping someone else is helping the grieving process and helping my pain. So I totally understand from a different perspective.
No, thank you. And definitely see in the chat, you have a great podcast. Someone definitely just
share it. Put it in the chat.
Please do. Please do. Yes, that was the next question. Where can we hear the podcast? Just curious, I just want to open the floor one more time. And and thank you so much, Erin, for adding that too, the idea that that being able to, that sometimes, not even sometimes, the more we use that muscle, that muscle of sharing and of being vulnerable and having empathy for ourselves, the stronger it grows. And that ends up being a very big inspiration to others, and it becomes a cycle, a circle, and yes, same thing, it does become touchy-feely, like it becomes a circle, all these people feeling, but that's really what we really need, and that's a big part of why, I know why I do what I do, and I know why a lot of people here do what we do. We want everyone to be able to feel each other and be able to support each other through that. So I do want to open the floor if anybody else would like to share, what are some ways that we're connecting with others? What are some ways that we are finding empathy, through our voice? Anyone want to share? Feel free to. All right, go on.
If
All right.
not, we have, oh, please go ahead, sir.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was going to say we have one more speaker that I wanted to save time for, but I didn't want to cut anybody off if there was more to share.
Oh, no, definitely go. Please continue.
Okay. Chanel, I have to say that you said the word feel and you talked about finding your voice. And for me, that's how I know that I matter and that we matter. Our voice is how we know we're a part of the world, right? And finding our voice isn't just about using words. It is knowing we matter. And, we are not complete without everybody's voice. And I thought you were so powerful sharing why our voice is such an important part of our humanity and empathy.
Very well said.
So thank you. I have to try to get the tears out of my eyes to introduce one more remarkable leader to help wrap up this session and really give some perspective on what this year has been. Just before I introduce Sandra, may I ask from everybody, in 2021, we will be creating working groups around creating real change and moving from these conversations into actions and then actions that create outcomes. And so if I can ask, if you'd like to, in the chat area, the initial groups that people have wanted to be a part of are health equity, which includes racial and ethnic disparities, LGBTQ plus rights and accessibility. So that will be our health equity topic. Having patient voice more involved in changing healthcare and treatment development is the second area. Telemedicine is the third area, and improving connection and understanding through telemedicine, the third area. The fourth area is the impact from all of these missed appointments and screenings through COVID. So how we will reduce that impact. And the fifth area is doing practical things to support people and communities through and beyond COVID. So may I ask, if you would like to be involved in one of those areas, please just write the area in the chat that you would like to be a part of, and we'll have more follow-up on how we're going to bring those together. And please feel free to type that in now or anytime in the last few minutes. Also, I want to make sure that Erin's book, we're going to be giving free copies to everybody of your book, Erin. So if anybody would like to receive Erin's book and read it, a copy actually, we're going to send out a survey. And may I ask the GRIT team to put the survey link in the chat function as well. And so anybody would like the book, or please share your feedback in the survey. You can click on that link, share your thoughts about this session or the COVID Advocacy Exchange broadly, and then we will actually send you Erin's book along with some other videos and resources to share with you in that as well. Okay, I don't believe I've missed anything. If I do, I'll come back. Erin, please, go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for offering that to everyone. That's really kind.
Yeah, thank you. And we have to give our founding partner, BMS, credit for that idea. And so thank you for making that happen. Okay, so I have the honor of introducing Sandra Lee-Ung, who's the Executive Vice President, General Counsel for BMS. And we've talked in this session about all of the things that get in the way, right? Healthcare is remarkably complex, remarkably challenging. And to do anything innovative requires people who believe in making it happen. And I would describe Sandy and what I've learned from her and my interaction with her as somebody who finds ways to make things happen. And so I am deeply honored to introduce you, Sandy, and to share a wrap up for this year and just your experience.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Hi, everyone. As Dave mentioned, my name is Sandy Lee-Ung, and I'm the General Counsel for Bristol Myers Squibb. When this year started and we began the COVID Advocacy Exchange, We couldn't have anticipated such a strong response from this community, but look at how everyone has really come together. Today, the COVID Advocacy Exchange has more than 4,800 registered users from more than 80 countries around the world. And together, we've held more than 15 live sessions this year, covering topics from resilience to telemedicine, access and preventative care, clinical trial design, and really importantly, patient voice. And more than 50 advocacy groups have opened booths in the exhibitors hall to share resources with one another, and that's just terrific. I am just so blown away about how everyone here has shown up for each other and built this community into what it's become. It's exemplified by what we saw here today. It's a space for empathy and inclusion and for everyone's voices to be heard as we navigate these challenging times together. There are so many things that happened today. I had to turn my camera off a couple of times because I was crying, but it was just so nice to be with people who really heard one another, listened to one another, and cared about one another, even remotely. I really want to thank Erin, Laura, Chanel, Dan, Jess, and Jeff, and so many others for sharing your stories, and so many others for sharing their stories on the chat. Here are a few takeaways that I have from today. Finding the space to talk about your experience can help others, and we heard a lot of that today. We need to give ourselves grace and forgiveness. Success at the cost of your family and your health is not success. We could all advocate for kindness. And importantly, language is important. Being called a patient rather than a subject is tremendous. As we look to the year ahead, I'm eager for more time with all of you and want to preview some of the exciting things we have in store for year 2 of the Exchange. Initially, the Exchange was developed as a resource in response to the COVID-19 crisis to help patient advocates and in turn, patients navigate the quickly changing environment brought by the pandemic. Next year, based on your feedback, we plan to continue offering virtual live sessions such as this one, and we also plan to expand the Exchange with even more resources available to continue supporting the global advocacy community. And included in that, we'll have a broader online hub for resources and connection and working groups that individuals can opt into. So I'm really looking forward to that. So look out for more information in your inboxes early next year. Thank you again to everyone for attending today's session. It's because of you that we've been able to build such a strong, welcoming, resilient community together. So thanks again, and I wish everyone a healthy, happy, and safe holiday season.
Sandy, thank you so much. Oh, please, go ahead.
Me?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Sandy, thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to say I hope to see you all back in 2021.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to you and to our founding partner, Bristol Myers Squibb, for creating this, and all of the advocates and attendees and exhibitors and everything. It's been an honor.